Hey 10th graders, good to see you again, or not, as the case may be. So we are moving on to our first segment of Reading Around the World, where remember we're trying to look at different types of literature, which can include stories, short stories, poems, dramas, from different locations outside of not only America, but just like the UK. And basically we want like some authors who are not old dead white guys, because we spend a lot of time in English classes studying old dead white guys, and I want us to make sure that we're getting exposed to great works of art that are not old dead white guys. So our first stop as we go on is we're going to start in Central and South America. Ole! No habla español, but I'm going to do my best. Okay? So when we look at the literature in this area, one of the, I guess, biggest trends, or remember I'm saying one take and done, a type of writing that has come out from this area is what we call magical realism. Magical realism it's not the same as like a fairy tale. It's not Cinderella. Basically, it is a story or a poem that is set in the real world, but there's like some twisted elements that are magical or fantasy based. I know that Harry Potter is often used to give an example of magical realism. To me, that's a little bit almost too magical. Like with real magical realism, it's kind of like you're just looking at the everyday and then all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, those are elves, or something like that. Again, this is a genre that has grown up from Central and South America. I'm going to include some links so that you guys can read up a little bit more on that, but I don't want to just read it to you. One of the real masters of this his name is Gabriel Garcia Marquez. His 100 Years of Solitude. He is basically, I don't want to say the godfather, but yeah, he's kind of like the godfather. He's from Colombia, since I had a Colombian roommate in college. She's like, it's not Colombia. And you will be reading a short story by him, A Man with Very Large Wings. I'll link that to you in a little bit. But to give you some more examples of what magical realism is, I'm going to read you a few selections from a book. Another famous example of magical realism is Like Water for Chocolate, and the author is Laura Esquivel, and she's from Mexico. So it's a really interesting book. It's they put in recipes in it, but it's a story. So first one, we're talking about our main character. Her name is Tita, and she's being born right now. So listen to this. Tita was so sensitive to onions. Anytime they were being chopped, they say she would just cry and cry. When she was still in my grandmother's belly, her sobs were so loud that even Nacha, the cook, who was half deaf, could hear them easily. Once her wailing got so violent that it brought on an early labor. And before my great-grandmother could let out a word or even a whimper, Tita made her entrance into this world. Prematurely, right there on the kitchen table, amid the smells of simmering noodle soup, thyme, bay leaves, and cilantro, steamed milk, garlic, and of course, onion. Tita had no need for the usual slap on the bottom because she was already crying as she emerged. Maybe that was because she knew then that it would be her lot in life to be denied marriage. The way Nacha told it, Tita was literally washed into this world on a great tide of tears that spilled over the edge of the table and flooded across the kitchen floor. That afternoon, when the uproar had subsided and the water had been dried up by the sun, Nacha swept up the residue the tears had left on the red stone floor. There was enough salt to fill a 10-pound sack. It was used for cooking and lasted a long time. Thanks to her unusual birth, Tita felt a deep love for the kitchen, where she spent most of her life from the day she was born. Okay, so this is basically the story of a baby being born into a kitchen. Yeah, I mean, she's being born in a kitchen. We've got some very realistic elements here, saying people are sensitive to onions. Okay, people really are sensitive to onions. I cut them up, it makes my eyes water and cry. We're talking about, you know, there being labor, that it's being premature, that the baby's premature. Okay, that can honestly happen. In terms of a baby being born in a kitchen, again, that can happen. They list the smells in the kitchen: noodle soup, thyme, bay leaves. All those are actual ingredients. None of them's like newt eyes or frog eyeballs or whatever. So then they say, they talk about the nurse, the cook, Nacha. She's sweeping up the kitchen. Okay, we really do have to sweep kitchen floors. I mean, she's not using a dragon to clean the floor or anything like that. So these are all the very realistic elements. But then we go back and we look at some of the unrealistic ones, like this baby who's still in her mom's uterus is so sensitive to onions that she cries so loud that people can hear her on the outside. Okay, that's not medically possible. Okay, but we're just trying to set the basis that this girl is going to be incredibly linked to the kitchen and the food that she cooks. But again, you can't, like, no babies in utero are going to be crying, and they're definitely not going to be able to cry loud enough to get themselves born prematurely. Okay, then we have the whole saying that the girl was literally washed into this world in a great tide of tears. Okay, so no one is born from tears. That's just not how it works. We got amniotic fluid, you know, oh, my water's breaking, but it's not tears. And then they say that there's so much tears that once it dried and it was just the salt residue, the nurse swept up the salt and it filled a 10-pound bag. Obviously, yes, when you have like tears, when they dry, you know, you may feel like the crusty salt, but no one's going to be able to like cry enough tears to fill a 10-pound bag. Okay, so that's that magical part of it. The setting is realistic. We've totally had people who can like cook in a kitchen, but we've got that element of magic in there. And it's not totally magic, but just a little bit. Okay, so again, we're going to explore more of that when you guys read the short story, A Man with Very Large Wings. And then we will get back and discuss. I want to get your thoughts on it, and I want to see if we can identify those elements of magical realism.